Disclaimer. This content may include dramatized or exaggerated interpretations of real-life events, including reports based on public speculation or commentary. While intended for entertainment purposes, viewer discretion is advised, as not all details may be factual or independently verified. What just happened in that courtroom, nobody saw it coming. A place that's usually quiet and controlled suddenly turned into something else. And it wasn't just because of the pressure in the air. It was because of him, Diddy.
The second an unreleased Prince track started playing through the courtroom speakers, everything stopped. The mood changed instantly. It felt heavy, like the air thickened in seconds. You could tell something serious was about to go down. And Diddy's face? It didn't just show emotion. It showed something deeper, like a man who got hit with a memory he never wanted to face again.
People inside say his reaction wasn't just emotional, it was big, loud, public. You could tell he lost control. But here's the key. This wasn't random. That moment was planned. That song was played on purpose. Because inside that last recording from Prince, hidden under the music and the mystery, was a message. A truth that someone wanted the world and the jury to hear. And Diddy, he wasn't ready. Now, you're probably thinking, why Prince? Why that song? Why today? What does it have to do with this case? We'll get to that. And once you understand what the song really meant, not just in music, but in court, you'll see the full picture. But let's rewind first. Because this trial, it's not just about headlines or Hollywood drama. It's about secrets, power, and years of pressure finally exploding in one room.
And when that happens, you get moments like this, real, raw, and impossible to ignore. Day Free started like the others. Reporters lined up early to get good seats. Celebrities slipped in through side doors with their heads down and sunglasses on. Lawyers shuffled papers like it was any other day. But today felt different. The room didn't just feel tense. It felt like it was buzzing. There were more security guards than before. 4 of them stood behind Diddy's table. Yesterday, there were only 2. Later, people said the court staff got special instructions that morning. No one said why, but it soon made sense. Diddy walked in looking sharp. Navy suit, clean cut, smooth smile. He nodded at a few familiar faces in the crowd, like he still had full control. But across the room, the prosecution was getting ready.
2 new tech guys, faces no one had seen before, were setting up some equipment. Wires, screens, small speakers. They worked fast. No one said a word. They just kept glancing over at Diddy. They knew what was coming. One reporter texted someone across the room. What's about to happen? You could feel it. Something big was about to drop. Then the judge came in. He called out names, reminded everyone to stay calm, but before things got started, he gave a warning. No matter what's shown or said today, this courtroom will stay in order. Any trouble and you'll be removed. The whole room went quiet. At first, the prosecutor spoke like usual, going over past witness statements, piecing the story back together. But then she stopped. Your Honor, she said, we're ready to present a new piece of audio evidence. She held up a small black device.
The defense jumped up fast. They shouted that they hadn't seen this before. The judge called for a quick talk. Lawyers on both sides started arguing at the bench. But after a short back and forth, the judge made his decision. The recording could be played. That's when everything changed. The prosecutor turned to the jury and the crowd and said clearly, what you're about to hear is the final private recording made by Prince Rogers Nelson before he passed away. The room went still. People froze. A few gasped. All eyes turned to Diddy, and his face went pale. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Diddy didn't move. He stared straight ahead. His legal team leaned in, whispering fast. Then the tech guys hooked the speaker up. And even before the audio started, something shifted in the room. It felt like everyone could sense what was coming. Everyone except Diddy. He looked scared. Then Prince's voice came through the speakers.
It was calm, slow, but different. This wasn't the bold Prince the world knew. This was a man who sounded scared. A woman sitting in the 3rd row covered her mouth. She started crying, not because of the music, but because of his voice. He didn't sound like an icon. He sounded like a man with something heavy on his chest. Prince said, I'm recording this because I don't know who to trust anymore. You could hear him breathing. He wasn't telling a story. He was speaking from a place of truth. And then, the part that shook the room, he started naming people, giving dates, saying where things happened. And right at the center, Diddy. Prince didn't hold back. He started talking about secret parties, Not rumors, not hearsay, but ones he was at. Parties in the Hamptons, Miami, private spots only insiders knew about. And everything he described matched what 3 other witnesses had already told the court. Diddy sat there, frozen. That confident look he came in with, gone.
His eyes were wide, his hands locked onto the table. One of his lawyers leaned in close, whispering fast, but Diddy didn't react. He just kept staring at nothing, like he was watching his whole world collapse. Then Prince's voice got sharper. He said, "What goes on at those parties isn't just wrong. It's criminal. I've seen it with my own eyes. I know who got hurt." Every word was like a blow to Diddy. And here's why it hit so hard. Prince wasn't alive anymore. He couldn't be cross-examined, couldn't be pressured to change his story. No spin, no edits, just the truth. He talked about one party in particular, December 2015. He named the guests, described the upstairs rooms in the house. And guess what? It was the same layout the prosecutor showed in court on day 1. Even the judge leaned in. Then Prince said something that shook everyone. I told him to stop. I told him it had gone too far. He laughed in my face. That's when the prosecutor hit pause.
The room sat in silence. Every person turned toward Diddy. His face was pale. His hands were trembling. One of his lawyers slid a yellow notepad in front of him to block the jury from seeing him fall apart. But it was too late. Everyone saw it. The cool image Diddy had walked in with, it was gone. And he didn't even need to say a word. Prince had done all the talking for him. But it wasn't over. Prince kept going. He started talking about why he stopped working with big record labels. Said he paid for his own studio time. Owned all his music. He said, "I got burned more than once. And when I asked them to make things fair, they wouldn't." Then came the metaphor. He said, "If a record label is just delivering music, that's fine. But even FedEx doesn't claim they own what's inside the box." Smart. Simple. And it made everyone in that courtroom think.
Then the story shifted to Cassie. She had already been on the stand for 4 straight days. And that morning, Diddy's lawyers came hard at her. They tried to make her look like she was into the lifestyle, like she wanted it. They read old texts in court, wild ones. One of them said, "I'm always ready to freak off." The defense used that to say this wasn't abuse, just 2 adults in a crazy relationship. But people who understand trauma, they know better. They know that what someone says at the beginning of a toxic relationship doesn't mean they weren't scared or controlled later. Back then, Cassie was young, living in a fantasy world. Money, fame, all of it. Maybe she thought if she said what Diddy wanted, she could keep the dream alive. But over time, the messages changed. The tone shifted. And that shift, that matters. Then Prince's voice came back again. And this next part changed everything.
He said this recording was locked in a private vault. It wasn't for fans, it was for protection. He made it just a few weeks before he died. And in his own words, he made it because he didn't feel safe. People in the courtroom leaned forward in their seats. The prosecutor explained, Prince recorded this to protect himself, to tell the truth while he still could. And the effect? Instant. This wasn't gossip. This was first-hand proof. From someone who had seen it all. And knew what was at stake. Prince started giving exact details, dates, places, names. And in the middle of all of it, Diddy. Prince spoke about parties at Diddy's mansion in Beverly Hills. He didn't just say, "I was there." He gave the address, described the rooms, even mentioned what happened behind closed doors. And every single thing he said, it matched what the prosecutors had already shown the jury. Then he said something that made people shift in their chairs.
What happens at these parties, it's not just about wild nights. It's planned, it's controlled. Then he dropped the line that sent a chill through the courtroom. I saw him separate young artists, pull them away from their teams, get them alone, put them in situations where they couldn't say no. That wasn't just a statement, it was a warning. A warning Prince hoped someone would hear before it was too late. And he didn't stop there. He said some of those artists thought this was their big break, their shot to finally make it. But once they realized what was really happening, it was already too late. Prince said he personally watched at least 7 young artists go through it. 7. And just when the room thought things couldn't get worse, he said something else. He confronted Diddy, directly. It happened at a Granny afterparty in 2016. Prince said he told Diddy that people were getting hurt, that it needed to stop. And what did Diddy do? He laughed.
"You might be Prince," Diddy said, "but you're not untouchable." Prince said he took that as a threat, and honestly, who wouldn't? The prosecution let that line hang in the air. Then the recording continued. Prince started talking about money, large payments, $2 million to one person, over $1 million to another. And these weren't guesses. The numbers matched the financial records already shown to the court. He said, "I've seen the transfers. I've seen the non-disclosure agreements. This isn't some mistake. This is planned." He wasn't emotional. He wasn't dramatic. He was focused, almost cold. Like a man who had been collecting proof for years. "I keep records," he said. "Dates, times, names, what happened. I've been tracking this since 2007. Even legal experts in the room were caught off guard. This wasn't just a recording. It was like opening a file cabinet of secrets." And while this was playing, Diddy didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't even blink.
But he was shaking. Prince's voice stayed steady, strong, and every word cut deeper into Diddy's image. Diddy leaned forward, breathing heavy. His shoulders were rising and falling, like he couldn't catch his breath. Then, Prince mentioned a night in Beverly Hills, gave a date, March 9th, 2016, then said an address, the same one prosecutors had already linked to Diddy. That's when it happened. Diddy stood up, not slowly, not calmly. He jumped to his feet like something had pulled him up. The whole room turned toward him, and the guards, they moved fast. 4 officers closed in around the defense table. Diddy's lawyers were scrambling now. One stepped in front of him, blocking the jury's view. Another tried to pull him back into his seat, but the recording didn't stop. Prince's voice kept playing, describing something that matched the exact charges against Diddy. And Diddy? He exploded. "That's a lie!" He shouted, loud, sharp, like he couldn't hold it in.
"He wasn't there. That never happened." His voice echoed through the courtroom. Gasps, real ones. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order, Mr. Combs, if you do not calm down, I will hold you in contempt." But it was too late. The jury had already seen everything. And while Diddy was yelling, Prince's voice kept playing. Calm, clear, unbothered. And that's exactly what the prosecutors wanted. This wasn't luck. It was a trap. And Diddy walked right into it. After Diddy's outburst, the courtroom froze. No one said a word. No one even moved. It was like the air got sucked out of the room. Everyone knew what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just a bad reaction. It was a full breakdown. Right in front of the jury. And the prosecutors? They didn't look surprised. They had been waiting for this moment. The judge slammed the gavel again and looked straight at Diddy. "You will not speak again unless asked. Do you understand?" Diddy didn't answer.
He just sat back down, face flushed, breathing hard. But the damage was already done. The jury saw it, felt it. They didn't just hear Prince's words, they watched Diddy come apart as those words played. And now, there was no going back. The court session continued, but the energy had changed. The prosecutors leaned in. They knew this was the turning point. Everything they'd built was now landing, hard. They connected Prince's testimony to receipts, emails, and messages from other witnesses. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was proof. They showed money transfers, numbers that matched what Prince mentioned. Then, they pulled up texts from others who'd already testified. Same dates, same names, same locations. Everything lined up. Diddy just sat there, shaking. One of his lawyers tried to hand him a water bottle. He didn't take it. Another slid a yellow notepad in front of him, something to focus on.
But his grip was too weak. The notepad just slid forward like he didn't even feel it. By late afternoon, Diddy looked like a different person. Pale, tired, almost sick. That polished, confident man who walked in wearing a navy suit? Gone. And then, one final blow for the day. The defense tried to stop the bleeding. They filed an emergency motion, right there in court, asking the judge to throw out the recording. They claimed it wasn't fair, said Prince wasn't alive to confirm it. But the judge didn't even blink. "Motion denied," he said. The courtroom stayed silent, except for one thing. A small smile from one of the prosecutors. Not cocky, not smug, just enough to show they knew. This was the moment they'd been working toward. Even security noticed the shift. 2 more officers moved closer to Diddy's table. One of them stood right behind his chair, not saying a word, just standing there. And the jurors, they noticed too.
3 of them kept their eyes locked on Diddy for the rest of the day. The judge told them to ignore the outburst. Emotions are not evidence, he said. But everyone in that room, including the jury, knew the truth. You can't unsee what just happened. You can't unhear that voice. And you can't unfeel the moment a man starts to fall apart right in front of you. The courtroom stayed tense. No one talked. No one moved. Even the usual chatter during breaks? Gone. Because after what just happened, everyone knew this trial had shifted. For good. The prosecutors didn't waste time. They kept going, strong, focused. Next, they brought in a new witness, someone no one saw coming this early. And this witness, they didn't raise their voice, didn't try to shock anyone. But every sentence hit like a punch. They spoke clearly, gave names, times, places. And the crazy part? It all lined up with what Prince had said earlier. One of the prosecutors asked,
"Did you ever feel threatened because of what you knew?" The witness nodded. Then said quietly, "It didn't come from strangers. It came from someone in this room." The entire courtroom went dead silent. All eyes turned to Diddy. He didn't flinch right away. But if you were really watching, you saw it. His jaw tightened, his shoulders tensed, and his eyes stopped looking forward. The prosecution didn't jump to the next question. They just let that moment sit. Let the jury absorb it. That's how you make an impact in court. Not by shouting, but by letting the truth hang in the air. And here's what made it worse for Diddy. That witness? They weren't even the strongest card the prosecution had. What came next? It was something the defense had hoped would never see the light of day. And once it did, everything changed. The judge gave the nod. The prosecution stood. They didn't call a name, didn't give a warning.
They walked to the screen, held up a flash drive, and said, "This is verified surveillance footage, time-stamped, recent, pulled from a home security system." The courtroom got real quiet. Then the lights dimmed, and the video played. No sound. But the images said everything. 2 people late at night. One already on the witness list. The other, someone no one had seen in the case. Until now. They were in deep conversation. Serious. Focused. Body language didn't look like friends catching up. It looked like planning. And the key? A lip-reading expert had already reviewed it. The prosecution handed the judge the transcript. The big line? Stick to the plan. Say what we talked about. Boom. That single sentence flipped the room upside down. It meant someone, maybe more than one person, had been told what to say on the stand. Coached, trained. And suddenly, this wasn't just about past behavior. This was about right now. The defense freaked out. They jumped up, say,
The judge took a look and then overruled. The footage stayed. And Diddy? He didn't yell this time. He didn't look up. He sat there, elbows on the table, face in his hands. Not a power mood, not control. It looked like giving up. Outside the courtroom, one word started spreading. Witness coaching. A phrase like that, it sticks with a jury. And the prosecution wasn't done. Not even close. Because next, they mentioned a phone call. One that could blow the case wide open. When the court returned after lunch, the energy was electric. Nobody had really eaten. Reporters picked at snacks. Jurors came back with serious faces. And everyone knew something big was still on the way. The prosecution stood up. No build-up, no dramatic music, just a quiet announcement. We have an intercepted phone call recorded 2 weeks ago. The voices have been verified. The judge nodded, and then it started. 2 voices, clear, familiar.
One belonged to someone tied closely to Diddy's circle. The other, a name the public hadn't heard until now. It started calm, like a casual chat. But then, a sentence dropped that changed everything. If this goes south, we already know who's taking the fall. Gasps. You could hear it. And then another hit. As long as we stick to the story, they can't tie it to him. The room stiffened. No shouting, no slamming the table, but the words hit like bricks. It sounded like a cover-up. A plan to protect Diddy at any cost. Defense lawyers jumped up, claimed the call was unclear, that it didn't prove anything. But the prosecution was ready. They brought the receipts, timestamps, phone numbers, exact GPS locations. And just when it seemed like the defense might regain control, the biggest bomb dropped. One voice on the call said, "He told me, say whatever it takes to keep my name clean." That was it. No more guessing.
It wasn't vague anymore. This was Diddy's name tied directly to witness coaching in his own circle's words. The judge allowed the full clip to play. The tone never got heated, but it didn't need to. It was calm, cold, calculated. And the jury? They were locked in. One juror covered her mouth. Another scribbled notes and underlined them twice. Diddy didn't look up once, didn't flinch, but his body language said it all. Tight shoulders, heavy breathing. Fists clenched under the table. The defense team scrambled, whispering, flipping through folders, passing notes like they were running out of time. And honestly, they were. Because this wasn't just evidence anymore. It sounded like a playbook being read out loud in front of the jury. When the audio ended, the prosecutor didn't say a word. She just looked at the jury and sat down. The silence said it all. People in the gallery started whispering, and one phrase kept coming up again and again.
How many more calls are there? Because if this was just the beginning, there could be more. And everyone in that courtroom could feel it. The walls were closing in. The courtroom returned from recess, but nothing felt the same. Reporters barely touched their laptops. Even the defense team looked rattled, like that phone call had cracked something open. Then, right on cue, the prosecution struck again. They called a witness, someone no one expected this early. And the moment they took the stand, the air shifted. This wasn't a showboater, no theatrics, just calm, deliberate testimony. But every word was a hit. They spoke with eerie precision. Names, timestamps, sequences of events, nothing exaggerated. Just sharp, surgical clarity. And the scariest part? Everything they said aligned. With Prince's recording, with other testimonies, with the video from the day before. The puzzle wasn't just coming together. It was starting to look like a blueprint.
Then came the question that made the room stop breathing. Did you ever feel pressured? A pause. A deep breath. Yes, the witness said, but not by strangers. By someone sitting in this courtroom. Heads turned. Instinctively, eyes locked on Diddy. He didn't react, not right away. But the shift was there. His jaw clenched. His stare went sideways. And for the first time in hours, he broke eye contact with the jury. The prosecutor let the silence hang. No follow-up. No need to hammer it home. The point had been made, and it hit harder than any cross-examination could. But they weren't finished, because just as things started to settle, the prosecution pulled a quiet checkmate. They requested a recess, not to pause, but to prepare for what they called real-time authentication of visual evidence. That phrase alone made people lean forward, and when court resumed, everything changed. They rolled in a screen, not a photo, not a document.
Surveillance footage, time-stamped, recently recorded, and verified. No sound, just movement, faces, a conversation in shadows, and one line that lip readers later confirmed: stick to the plan, say exactly what we practiced. That single sentence unraveled weeks of defense strategy. Suddenly, this wasn't just a messy case. It looked like witness tampering, like manipulation, like control. And as the clip ended, the prosecution didn't say a word. They just let the footage sit. Let the jury sit with it. Diddy still didn't move, but his hands, now clenched so tight they looked like stone. Guillotine scrambled, papers flew, notes passed. But the tension, it wasn't just in the room anymore. It was in the jurors' eyes. They were watching, closely, not just what was said, but how it was reacted to. And then came the whisper, the phrase that started bouncing from bench to bench. How many more tapes are there? Prosecution didn't answer that.
They didn't have to, because the implication was louder than any closing argument. This wasn't a single leak. This was a dam breaking. And everyone in that courtroom, they were just starting to realize how deep the flood might go. They didn't wait for morning. That same afternoon, the defense fired back, fast and loud. They stood, mid-session, and asked for a rare mid-trial evidentiary hearing, right in front of the jury. A bold move. The goal? Shock the jury back onto shaky ground. Inject just enough confusion to slow the prosecution's momentum. The judge gave a long look, then nodded. Proceed. And just like that, the tone flipped. The defense changed gears, no longer cold and clinical. Now, they were emotional, intimate, playing the sympathy card. They didn't talk strategy. They told stories. They painted Diddy not as a predator, but as a man surrounded by opportunists. Friends turned foes. Ex-lovers rewriting history for headlines.
Then came the line aimed squarely at the jury. Not every whispered word is truth, and not every voice from the past gets to rewrite a man's legacy. It was smooth, rehearsed, delivered like a closing monologue, and for a moment, just a flicker, the jury seemed to shift. Then came the exhibits, private texts, intimate emails, Messages from accusers. Messages the defense claimed told a very different story. One email hit hard. We both knew the game. Don't pretend you didn't play it too. It landed like a punch. Some jurors winced. One crossed their arms, and for the first time in days, Diddy lifted his eyes, scanned the jury, held their gaze. Not long, just long enough to remind them he was still here, still fighting. Then the defense dropped a voicemail. 9 seconds long, a woman's voice, someone who had testified earlier, laughing. Tell them whatever makes you feel better. I'll play along if I have to.
They didn't say when it was recorded. Didn't offer context. Because they didn't need to. They just needed doubt. It worked. For about 5 minutes. But this is a courtroom. And the truth has a long memory. The next morning, the prosecution walked in with a look that said, "Thanks for opening that door." They called that same woman back to the stand. Black blazer, no smile, no hesitation. The prosecutor asked her one question. "Do you want the jury to hear the full message?" She nodded. They pressed play. And suddenly that 9-second clip became a minute-long confession. The laughter? A mask. "I don't know what to do anymore," her voice cracked. He said if I don't help him, he'll ruin everything. I feel like I'm trapped. The courtroom froze. Context had changed everything. This wasn't a game. This was fear. And now the jury wasn't squinting through uncertainty. They were seeing the manipulation in real time. The prosecution turned to the jury and said,
They gave you a soundbite. We gave you the whole story. Boom! No shouting, no drama. Just truth and the echo of it. Diddy didn't speak, didn't twitch. But his attorneys, scrambling. They objected, claimed it was prejudicial, said it was a setup. The judge didn't flinch. If one side plays part of a message, he said, the other side gets to finish it. Case law, open and shut. The witness ended her re-testimony with this. I laughed in that voicemail because it was easier than admitting how scared I was. Pretending to be okay was safer than being honest. No one moved. The defense, cornered, outmaneuvered. That strategic swing, it had backfired. And now a new phrase was floating through the courtroom press corps. Defense opened a door they can't close. Because what comes next is even bigger. There's one more name, not yet spoken aloud. And when it drops, even Diddy might not be able to sit still.
The courtroom was full before 9 a.m. Journalists lined the back wall. Sketch artists sharpened pencils like they were bracing for war. Security was tighter than ever. Even the clerks looked tense. Something was coming, and everyone knew it. Then the prosecution stood, calm, steady, no theatrics. We're calling a new subject to the record, not as a witness, but as a voice. Whispers flared instantly, because the name they said next, Kim Porter. The room didn't gasp. It held its breath. But this wasn't about testimony. The prosecutor clicked the screen. A single document appeared, a personal email, tucked away in an encrypted archive discovered by Kim's estate attorney. A journal entry, dated just months before her death. And when they read it aloud, the courtroom froze. Sometimes I feel like I've seen too much. Like silence is safer, but I won't stay quiet forever. She wasn't making accusations. She was preparing to speak. The entry went on.
If anything ever happens to me, I want someone to know I was ready to talk. I just didn't get the chance. You could feel it, the emotional shift. Not sensationalism, not spectacle. A warning from someone who knew. The defense jumped to their feet. Objection! She can't be cross-examined. The judge barely looked up. It's an authenticated statement. We'll allow it. To drive it home, the prosecution brought in a digital forensics expert. Calm, clinical, no flair. Yes. The email was real. Yes, it was backed up automatically to a secure cloud. Yes, the metadata matched. Nothing altered, nothing fabricated. It was Kim's voice, preserved, protected, finally heard. Diddy didn't blink, didn't flinch, but he didn't look up either. He just stared ahead, like the words weren't coming from a screen, but from behind him. And then the prosecutor closed the screen and said, sometimes the strongest testimony doesn't come from the witness stand. It comes from courage left be.
No need to add more. They had let her speak. That was enough. Court recessed, but no one moved. Because now, the question wasn't just what Kim knew. It was who else knew, too. And if they'd finally had enough of staying silent. Because after today, it's clear. The silence is breaking. And tomorrow, it might shatter completely. They tried to brace for it. Extra guard at the doors. Overflow rooms packed. Even the court sketch artist admitted she brought backup pencils. Because word had spread. The prosecution was about to show something no one had ever seen. Not a document, not another email, not even an audio clip. Footage, real, raw, never released to the public. The judge gave a warning before it played. What you are about to see has been verified by forensic specialists. It is protected material. Any unauthorized recording will result in immediate removal. No one moved. Then the screen lit up. It was grainy, low angle, dated. But it didn't need to be Krista.
It was Diddy's house. Confirmed, timestamped, the Beverly Hills property. A familiar group hovered in a second-floor hallway. Conversations, quiet gestures, doors opening, closing. Then a young woman appeared in the shot. Wide-eyed, uncomfortable, she stepped into a room, alone. The camera timecode rolled on. 57 minutes later, she came out. Hair messy, eyes red, shaking. There was no sound, no screaming, no assault on tape. But the story? It was written in her face. The prosecutor let the video hang. "This is not a one-off incident," she said. "This is a pattern." Another clip played. Different night, different guests. Same house. A repeat. Same choreography. Same hallway, same door. And in that second clip, one of the men spotted the same person heard in that intercepted phone call saying, "Stick to the plan." That wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. The defense leapt up. Objection. No context. No audio. But the judge was ready.
"You'll have time to cross, but the footage stays." The prosecutor pressed pause again and said just one line. "Sometimes the clearest evidence doesn't speak. It's what it shows." You could feel the blow land, hard. Even in silence, the footage had said everything. Diddy, still. But his face wasn't stoic anymore. His jaw was tight, his foot tapped, his hand trembled against the table's edge. It didn't matter if he spoke. His body did. And the jury? Locked in. One woman blinked hard, another shook her head slowly. Because now, it wasn't just stories. They'd seen it. And once a jury sees something, you can't unsee it. As court adjourned, the prosecution didn't linger. They walked out quietly, but the silence they left behind? Deafening. Tomorrow, they said, they'll call their final direct witness. And if rumors are true, he's not a victim. He's not a celebrity. He's someone who used to work inside the house, and he's done keeping secrets.
By mid-morning, the air in the courtroom wasn't tense, it was thick. No noise, no whispering, just a waiting silence that felt like a countdown. Then, the prosecution stood and said the words everyone had been bracing for. "We call our final direct witness." No name was leaked in advance, not to reporters, not even to court staff. So, when a man in his 40s stepped through the back door and took the stand, the room turned to stone. He was tall, clean-cut, no flair. "Please, state your name and your former role with the defendant." His voice was low but steady. "I was head of internal security for Mr. Combs. I worked for him for 9 years. And with that, everything changed. Because this wasn't a tabloid source. This was the man who stood at the door and watched the house from the inside." The prosecutor kept it simple. What did internal security mean? He didn't flinch.
"I didn't guard the property from the outside world. My job was to keep what happened inside from ever getting out." You could hear someone in the gallery exhale sharply. And then he told the story. How he managed surveillance systems, which cameras to check, which to shut off. How he handled the guest lists. Who could come in? Who had their phones taken? And sometimes, I was told to delete things. The room jolted. The prosecutor leaned in gently. "And who told you to delete them?" A pause. Then, Mr. Combs, more than once. Gasps. No longer whispers, real, audible gasps. The defense exploded. Objection, speculation, hearsay. But the judge raised a hand. He's stating first-hand knowledge. Let him finish. And finish he did. The witness described a night in 2016, shortly after Prince's death. There was an incident. Upstairs. Cameras caught too much. And Diddy? He told me to pull the tapes. Said if anyone asked. They were overwritten by accident.
But the witness didn't follow the order. Not completely. "I made backups. Quietly. I saved them." The prosecution paused, like they wanted the jury to catch their breath. Then asked, "Where are those backups now?" He didn't blink. "With my attorney, secured, and shared with law enforcement the same day Prince's recording was played in this courtroom." Ye could hear pens stop scratching. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. This wasn't just about what he saw. It was about what he still had. Files, videos, emails, logs. A digital time capsule of everything Diddy never wanted public. The prosecutor closed with one final question. "Why are you coming forward now?" He looked straight at the jury. Because I fought staying silent protected me. But I see now, silence only protected him. And with that, he stepped down. The prosecution rested. No big speech, no final show. They didn't need it, because that last witness, he wasn't there to accuse. He was there.
And Diddy didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink, but the jury, they saw it, all of it. The mask was gone, and all that was left was a man sitting in a courtroom he no longer controlled. Court adjourned early that day, not because of scheduling, but because nothing more needed to be said. The prosecution's final witness wasn't just devastating, he was undeniable. And by the time the jury filed out, you could see it on their faces. They weren't just deciding a verdict anymore. They were processing a fall. That evening, news anchors skipped their intros. Legal analysts called it one of the most strategic endgames they'd ever seen in a courtroom. Because the prosecution hadn't just told a story, they built one. Layer by layer, tape by tape, face by face. They didn't rush, they didn't swing wild. They waited for exactly the right moment to press play. And when they did, the defense cracked wide open. The next morning, the shift was immediate.
Diddy walked in with fewer people behind him. No sunglasses, no nods to the gallery, no bravado. His legal team, tight-lipped. No banter, just damage control mode. The judge entered. No small talk, no warnings, just one firm directive. Let's proceed with the defense's case. You may call your first witness. And for the first time in this trial, the defense hesitated. A long pause, then a quiet voice. Your Honor, at this time, we reserve our right to rest. Whispers swept the gallery. Even reporters looked stunned. They were giving up? No counter witness, no final rebuttal, no attempt to explain away the insider, or the video, or Prince's voice from the grave. They didn't challenge the final testimony. They couldn't. One analyst said it best on a live stream that night. You don't rest unless you're out of options or out of lies. But inside that courtroom, no one needed a headline to understand what was happening. Because Diddy, he wasn't leaning back anymore.
He was folded forward, elbows on the table, as if the weight of the story had finally settled on his shoulders. The judge announced closing arguments would begin the next day. That meant one thing. The jury was almost free. Free to decide. Free to speak with their eyes and pens instead of just their silence. And for Diddy, there would be no more interruptions, no more performances, no more edits. Because now, the only thing left was the truth. The jury entered slow. Not tired, just heavy. Like they were carrying the weight of everything they'd heard in the past 2 weeks. And knew today would only add more. This was it. Closing arguments. No more evidence. No more outbursts. Just words. And words, today, would matter more than ever. The judge gave his instructions. Neutral, careful, formal. You are not here to punish fame. You are here to measure truth. Then he looked at both sides. Proceed. The prosecution stood first.
No slideshow, no props, just a single sheet of notes folded twice. And the lead prosecutor didn't pace or gesture, she just stood, still. This case isn't about music, or fashion, or lifestyle. It's about pattern, about control, about a man who thought power would shield him forever. She moved slowly across the front of the jury box. We didn't ask you to take anyone's word for it. We showed you documents, video, timestamps, names, receipts. You heard Prince's voice. You saw the footage. You watched people, not read about them, say what happened to them. She let the silence sit. Then one last thing. Justice doesn't need drama. It needs clarity. And now, that's yours to deliver. She sat down. No flair, no final note, just trust in the evidence. Then the defense stood. A different tone, measured, emotional, leaning on doubt. They didn't dispute what was shown. Instead, they asked why it was shown and when.
They want you to believe every text, every laugh, every pause means something dark. But memory is messy, relationships are complex, and people are flawed. Then came their final swing. If we start convicting people for what others say about them, without hearing the full story, then none of us are safe. They looked at the jury. This isn't a trial about a monster. It's a trial about a man. And with that, they sat down. No outburst, no defense witness to steal focus. Just an attempt to reframe what had already become impossible to unsee. The judge gave his final instructions. The jury stood, and then they left the room. No one clapped. No one spoke. Because now, It was out of everyone's hands. Diddy didn't move. He just sat there. Same position, same stare. But the mask? Gone. What's left was something quieter, smaller, a man waiting to hear how the world would remember him. And in the hallways, the world waited too.
Because no matter how long that jury took, the verdict wouldn't just be about guilt. It would be about legacy and whether silence really could protect someone forever. It took them just under 6 hours. No overnight deliberation, no second day. When the jury sent word that a decision had been made, the courtroom filled faster than it had all trial. Reporters scrambled, phones silenced. Every single person was seated before the judge returned. Even the gallery sat straighter. Like they knew history was about to stamp itself into the floor. Diddy walked in slowly. Same suit, but a different walk. No swagger, just gravity. He didn't look around, didn't nod to his team, didn't glance at the jury. Just sat down and stared at the floor. The judge read the process aloud, formal, careful, then turned to the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. The clerk took the envelope, broke the seal. Time slowed. Then she began to read.
On the count of conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty! A sharp breath from the second row. On the count of coercion and witness manipulation, guilty! Someone whispered. Oh my God. A guard turned toward the gallery. And then, the one that landed like thunder. On the count of facilitating criminal misconduct, guilty! 3 words. That was all it took. No shouting, no collapse, but the impact, you could feel it ripple. Diddy didn't flinch, not at first, but his hands, shaking, barely visible, but real. His attorney leaned in, whispered something. Diddy nodded, slowly, like it took every ounce of strength just to move. The judge thanked the jury, released them with deep gratitude, and said something no one expected. Your duty here has changed lives, not because of the verdict, but because of the courage it took to reach it. Court was adjourned, and that was it. Except it wasn't. Because when the press hit the courthouse steps, the questions exploded.
Will there be appeals? Are more charges coming? Is this the start of something bigger? But inside the courtroom, stillness. Cassie was seen hugging her husband. No tears, just relief. Her brother gripped her hand like he hadn't been able to breathe until now. Diddy's team packed up quickly. No posturing, just quiet movements and unreadable faces. And Diddy, he left through the side exit. No words, no statement, just a final look toward the bench. The place where the mask came off. A court officer later said, it wasn't like watching a man get sentenced. It was like watching a kingdom fall. And the industry, shaken. Because the real question wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was, who else was in those rooms? What else is on those hard drives? And if Prince left one recording behind, what else did he leave waiting? The jury gave their answer. But the echoes, they're just beginning. The courtroom is quiet now.
The cameras are gone. The sketch artists packed up. The jury has gone back to their lives, forever changed by what they heard. But outside, the world is still reacting. News broke within minutes. Headlines flooded every screen, every feed, every app. Diddy found guilty in explosive trial. Prince's voice from the grave turns case. Witnesses once silent now speak freely. Every network scrambled for special coverage. Legal experts called it unprecedented. Not just because of who was on trial, but how the prosecution told the story. Piece by piece, fact by fact, until the lie unraveled itself. The music industry shaken to its core. Rumors surged. Artists started distancing themselves. Statements were posted. Past collaborators deleted photos. Brand partnerships evaporated overnight. And behind closed doors, more subpoenas, more sealed court orders. Because the prosecution never said Prince's recording was the only one, just the first.
Inside Diddy's inner circle, silence fell like a hammer. People who once posted from his parties, now ignoring calls. A few insiders hired lawyers before the verdict was even read. Because if the floodgates are opening, they don't want to be the next name pulled in. Meanwhile, survivors, they're finally being heard. Cassie left court quietly. No press conference, no cameras, but the message was clear. She didn't just survive him, she helped stop him. And Prince? He never took the stand. He never saw the inside of that courtroom. But somehow, he testified. Through his voice, his words, his recordings, and most of all, his warning. People are asking now, what else did he document? What was he trying to protect? Who else was he trying to save? And the industry? They're listening now. Because silence isn't loyalty anymore. It's liability. The judge's final words are already being quoted in law schools.
Justice is not about how long someone gets away with something. It's about when the truth finally stops running. So yes, the trial is over. The verdict is in. But the story? Just getting started.